All right, let's look at some flight planning. So, typically, the day before the flight or shortly before the flight, we have to do what's known as flight planning. So, we'll use this app, it's called ForeFlight. So, here is the map of the United States, and the blue dot is where we are at. The GPS has picked it up, and this dotted line around is the state of Alabama. And tomorrow, I'm making a trip to a town called Canton in Georgia, which is a state next to it. And how do we go about doing that? Well, first of all, we need to know the airport codes. And I do know that the airport that I'm going to fly out of is called Bessemer Airport. The code is KEKY. And the airport I'm going to is KCNI. So I'm going to put that in this KEKY, KCNI, and hit go. So here's the path of the flight from the two cities, from Birmingham to Canton, Georgia. Now, it's not as simple as this. So we'll now switch this map background to an aviation map, which would be this one. So this map quickly, just briefly, it shows all the different airports, the airspaces and routes and all that. So now along this path, I'm going to check and see if there's any restriction. Oh, I see something here. Let me zoom in. Aha. So if you look at this, it says, for reasons of national security, pilots are requested to avoid flight at and below 5,000 AGL at the above ground level in this area. So which area is that? Typically, it's these hash lines, and I cannot fly through that. Well, but that happens to be my path. What do I do? So I deviate. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to clear these annotations, and I'm going to drag this and drop it just for reference a nearby airport. I don't have to go to that airport, but just I'm going to fly over it. So that's A and B. That's Anniston Regional. So now I have the map. So then again, I look along the path. There's no restrictions. I'm not going into any class airspaces. For example, this big blue circle, this one here, this is called the Atlanta Class B, and here's Atlanta Airport, which is a big airport, and we don't want to cross that. That's about 30 miles out, but we're going to stay clear out of it. So we're good, and this is our basic flight path. Well, there's a few more things we need to look at. For example, we need to figure out at what height are we going to go, what altitude. So this will give the different tailwinds or headwinds. It looks like we're all getting tailwinds here, so I'm going to pick 7,500, which is already picked for me. And this is my route. And then this is my navigation log. It tells me that from KKY to K and B, it's going to take about 56 nautical miles. It'll burn so much gas, and it's 24 minutes and all that good stuff. So then I look at my profile page. So at 7,500, I'm not going to hit any towers or anything. So you can see all the different cell phone towers and things pointing out here. So I'm good on that. And that would be the flight planning. And I can put a lot of other documents and everything else as I need, but for now, this would be the way. Now, when I get closer to this airport, so here is the Cherokee County Airport in Canton. It has two runways, runway 5 and runway 23. How do I know which runway to land? Well, that depends on the wind tomorrow when you go. So I'll go back to my flight plan screen, go to my edit and procedure, and I'll say traffic pattern coming into that. So here's my two options, runway 5 and runway 23. So let's say the wind is going to support runway 23. So I pick that, and there's two ways to get there. So I'll just say cross midfield direct, and then I'll add it to the route. So here we go. Now what it's done is it's given me the exact route on how I'm going to enter. So I come up to this point, I turn right, go over the airport, and make a big square pattern into the landing. So now we have the entire flight path here. Now tomorrow when I get into the plane, I can transfer this plan to the GPS on the plane and go from there. So this is just the flight planning portion of it. And I can look at it in the zoomed out in the portion and see where it's going. Now let me go to a performance screen where I can look at the performance of the airplane, the fuel and all that. So Bonanza Performance, this is the type of the aircraft. So here's the weight and balance. I'll just go quickly. It's too much detail. Basically, it talks about what's the weight of the pilot and if there's a passenger and how much baggage in which seat they're going to sit. And it tells you at full fuel if you're inside this square box or not. It tells you your center of gravity is it 2 forward or 2 back. and it gives you that information. So as long as you're inside the box, you're good. And then here's the departure runway, runway 23. The blue line shows which direction the wind is coming from, how many feet it will roll before takeoff, and all that good stuff. Very important information. And this is critical. This is the en route portion. So it shows that the trip's going to take 1 hour and 4 minutes, but that assumes going at a cruise power of 55% of maximum. So let's say I'll go at 65% max power, then it only takes an hour. If I go at 75% of the full power, it only takes 57 minutes. And it gives you all the settings of the engine that you need to do that and how much fuel it burns. So based on that, I'm going to burn about 15 gallons and I'll still have 53 left. So there's plenty of fuel left. And this is on the landing side. It tells you which way the wind is coming from, and which runway you're going to take, and how you're going to land. So that's just the performance characteristics, and that's it. And then you can go back to your flight plan and look at any other issues if you have, and any deviations or whatever. So this map in the background is called the VFR map, or Visual Flight Rules map. Now I can also pick the IFR map, which is basically like highways. So all these black lines you see are air routes, and we're not going to take those routes because that makes it longer. Now sometimes if there's a lot of traffic in the air, the ATC might ask you to go a certain route. So I can look at what it could be possibly. So I can go at routes here. There's 6 possible ways to get there, and one of the could be this one, which is much longer, or it could be this one or this one, and you just pick the one you want. But we're not going to pick that. We're just going to go VFR. So we'll go back to the VFR sectional, and here it shows all the different things. All right, so this is basically the flight planning software. There's different programs, of course. This is just one of the ones that I'm familiar with and I use. And these circles are basically airspaces around it, and it shows you how far the control of that airport is. For example, here, if I go north of my airport to Birmingham, this is Birmingham, it says from 4600 to surface is Class D airspace around the airport. And there are some tall towers here I have to be careful about. And it also gives you frequencies to call. So if I need to call the control tower, it'll be 119.9. The air traffic information system would be 119.4. It says that the elevation is 650. The length of the longest runway is 12,000 feet, which is a pretty long runway. Whereas here in Bessemer, the length of the longest runway is only 6,000 feet. And elevation is 700 and the frequency is 123. So we need to know all this before we go. So as you go along, when we have to make our radio calls, we need to know the frequencies. So you look it up ahead of time. That's just about all about the flight planning. More in the air tomorrow.